Thanks so much, Jimmy. All right, good morning, everybody. Okay, so I am Nicole. For those of you who haven't met me as yet, I am the systems director out at Northern Arizona Healthcare. I just actually got there about 6, 7 months ago. I moved from the beautiful tropical island of Guam, where as the director over there at the local public hospital. In my spare time, I do like to dabble in everything. So I am the SHRM certification director for the Guam chapter CNMI. I'm engaged with a lot of the education. So I teach, I'm a dissertation mentor. So I like to call myself an octopus. I'm very engaged in both regional radiology as well as in the international realm. When I was in Guam, I had the opportunity to travel quite a bit to Asia, to a lot of the different conferences. And by the way, if you have the opportunity to go to the RSNA in Paris, the European one, I highly recommend it. It's an experience of a lifetime. Definitely, you can see the cultural differences there and how they put on conferences. Okay, so why did you choose to attend this session? You had the choice of the beach and some other presentations. What brought you, what intrigued you into this? And just because we're a nice, small, cozy group, I'd like for us to just be as interactive as we can. So tell me, why did you choose this?
I live in a very small town, and I guess there can be kind of culturally closed-minded, and so I thought this was an opportunity for me to grow and to bring it back to my family.
Yes, and that's the first thing about cultural intelligence, cultural competence is your awareness. I don't know what I don't know, right? And sometimes we feel that we're in our own little bubble and there's not much to learn because everybody looks and acts and thinks like us. So why even bother? But you can see as we go along here with today's world, it's becoming more diverse. People are moving. There's lots of job opportunities there. So you may be faced with situations and you don't know how to react to it or what is the best way of communicating with other people. How about yourself, Nathan? What brought you to this?
So, especially the more and more as we populate, as we do, the diversity and cultural differences of each group changes. Be abreast and be on top of that, and just having some kind of insight on how to handle certain things or be sensitive to people that you may not think that way. But then, honestly, if you live in a town like you said, a small town, and you only deal with a certain group, most of them know, and then people start influx different. You don't think about someone that may need to pray during the day, or someone that may doesn't celebrate a certain holiday, but everybody else does. It's like, why do you want to celebrate it? And some of these things just you don't even think about. You just kind of like sitting there like just not aware of what you're doing.
Correct. And those are the kinds of situations that make it awkward for some of our employees. I remember once I walked in when I was in Washington State, I walked into the break room and I was having lunch and it was quite a diverse group. And somebody walked in and were like, ew, what is that smell? And somebody had just heated up their lunch, but it was a heavily ethnic lunch. And it was fish, and I can see the embarrassment on my colleague's face because he was there eating his lunch with the rest of us. So obviously it meant that his lunch was smelly. But so it's things like that, and how do we adjust our verbiage? How do we react to situations like this? So that's definitely what I'm trying to do, just to raise your awareness. There's a lot that we can talk about. But we will I'll give you the high level view of it. They're just things for you to start thinking about and being more aware and increasing your cultural intelligence. So the significance you mentioned, all of these points, right? To get to know your people more, to understand patients even. So this is about leading your team culturally as well as being culturally sensitive to the patient's need. We try to use this one size fit all approach. Maybe you're familiar with AIDIT and things like that. But I can tell you, AIDIT even though Guam was a territory of the US, AIDIT would never work there. And it's because culturally, you hear people in the South, they want to maintain the words like honey and sweetheart. That's a means of connection. So again, what is culturally appropriate for your patient population as well as your staff? Culture, so there's, in leadership, we talk quite a bit of emotional intelligence. Now, maybe within the last several years, we hear culture coming up. You hear diversity and inclusivity. So, but culture has taken a back seat until recently, only because, hey, we'll just learn it as we go. Only when you're faced with the situation, there's no need for me to learn it right now. My environment is pretty much homogenous. I know about it. What else is there to know? I don't need to know anything right now. So typically gets left behind and we just kind of figure it out as we go. Or we think we know enough. I thought I knew quite a bit of culture, but as the more I travel and I got engaged with different diverse teams, I recognize there is so much more to learn. And I consider myself pretty much a subject matter expert at it, but I keep finding myself in situations like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with it culturally? And then again, I can tell you just coming into my organization, it's pretty much a homogenous culture, and I am trying to raise awareness, diversity, and inclusivity initiatives in my organization. And it's again, when you're in the homogenous group, you're not necessarily thinking and experiencing what people like myself or others with different culture to you may be experiencing. And the other significance is when we look at the US as a whole, we're becoming more and more diverse. There is Latinos, there is Asians, there's so many people coming in. This is your patient population. And you may hear in the customer service environment, how can you better serve your population if you don't think, feel, and act like them? And this is exactly what we'll be experiencing in healthcare. You're going to have patients coming in from all different walks of life, and again, providing that cookie cutter approach and expect to have high customer service results. So this is another means to educate yourself to be more aware of, well, what is my patient demographic? Who is the different populations that you serve, and are you truly providing patient-centric care? Because most of us, we provide that cookie cutter best practice approach, right? Whether it's AIDIT or some other form, team steps, all of these things. But is that truly patient-centric or employee-centric? The other thing is that we have a lot of cultures that are trying to preserve their culture, but for whatever reason, they feel like if I come into my organization, I cannot be my true self because there's really limited people around me like this. And I can tell you, I'll have a lot of storytelling as I go along here. As I came to the US, it was very difficult for me. I spoke English. I thought I knew English. The English was my mother tongue. And I moved here about 20 years ago. And I came in and I could not understand anybody. The American accent was very, very difficult for me to understand. I worked as a waitress. You can imagine the chaos, right? Seriously, I had to really tune my ear in. And where I found my comfort zone is with my Hispanic patients, my customers. I spoke Spanish pretty well back then, and that's the only way I can communicate with people. So if you sounded like you had an Hispanic accent, I would immediately jump to Spanish, a second language. So it was almost that for me, and because I got so many orders wrong, for me to be accepted, I had to let people think that I was an absolute foreigner, that I spoke no English. And that was pretty amazing because over time, I had to get more in tune with the accent, but I also needed to understand how do I conform my words for you to understand how I spoke. And it's the simple things. Even now, in some organizations, when I'm dealing with patients, if I say, can I get you a glass of water? People look at me, what? And I have to remind, or I have even to formulate the words sometimes can be difficult. So I've learned how to become a little bit more Americanized or Westernized. But then the downside, the acculturation versus preservation of culture. Now, if I go home, my family think, oh, you want to be American, huh? You sound an American. And, unfortunately, for them, I'm a little bit, they're disappointed or they're embarrassed because, we always kid about people who come home and they have a little bit of an accent, but they don't truly understand why we need to be more assimilated. And sometimes, after not being home for such a long time, Some of my words, like we say garage versus garage, we say water versus water, sweet drink versus soda. So even just using some of those words, it's like you're forsaking your culture. And this is why sometimes when people come, and I hear staff saying it, oh, they've been in America for 5 years, or they've been here, they've moved here. Why don't you speak better English? Or why don't you understand? And this is not like just pockets of people. I can tell you a lot of the organizations I go to, I teach quite a bit, so in traveling, you hear people making these comments. Why do you dress like that? Okay, and it's because, and it isn't necessarily, I mean, I'm talking about immigrants in that sense, but sometimes people want to preserve who they are, and it becomes difficult. From the Southern accent to, New Orleans, all of these things, it's like sometimes it becomes really difficult to be yourself. And you try to hide that. And as we hide that, in the same organizations, we're saying, come be your authentic self. But we're not truly letting people be their authentic self. And then, of course, the last part is that there are known socioeconomic disparities in healthcare. I have seen with my own eyes patients get treated unfairly because of their background. I've seen the differences, and of course, I'll use different culture just because of my experience, but Eastern Europeans, Somalis, Chukis, all of these cultures I've come into contact with and seen how different we treat them. And especially if you're in an area where there's a significant difference in culture, it could be subtle. In the ER, the nurses, next time you're around in an area like that, observe exactly what happens, and you'll see those little differences. And of course, patients pick up on that, and they're not going to have the best of experience. Now, when we talk about culture, I was talking more of immigrants, but what does your staff look like right now? So I would guess for you, the majority of your staff is looking somewhat like yourself. You said very homogenous. Who else, your staff or your organization, has this variety? What does your organization look like? Like this?
Pretty much. I mean, if you're talking like skin color or whatever, there'd be a couple different hands in that picture, different colors.
Right, so a couple different shades, but the usual thought when we see this is that it's not diverse. But that can be a very, very diverse team or patients. So he mentioned skin color. When we talk about anything culture, immediately the thought is on skin color. And that's not always the case, because as you will see in just a second, culture is a whole lot more than skin deep. Most times when we think of diversity and cultural competence, we're thinking about how do we deal with different ethnicities based on their color. But that's not entirely true, right? We all came from different backgrounds. We're all from different states, different regions, religious backgrounds, education, socioeconomic, and that all makes an impact on who you are today. And that is what really is the foundation of your culture. So the misnomer is that diversity is based on just different ethnicities. Initially, when I came to Florida, everybody thought I was Mexican. And then sometimes, they look at my nose, oh, you're from, Saudi Arabia or Egyptian or somewhere, based on, I guess, the size of my nose. And then depending on when I was in the military, everybody thought I was from India. So nobody never guessed that I was from the Caribbean. And even when I told people, well, yeah, I'm from the Caribbean island of Trinidad, they're like, oh, so what part of India is that from? I'm like, I'm on the other side of the world. So it also, again, you'll hear me talk about curiosity, because even things like that, when we start making assumptions, it kind of hurts people a little bit, right? Or you already know that they are assessing you based on how you look versus asking those questions out of curiosity. So we want to, as we develop this patient-centric initiative, or you're trying to be more inclusive with your staff to include your open door policy, I want you to start thinking about it. Is that really working? Am I truly being patient-centric? Or am I providing that cookie cutter approach? because hopefully by the end of today, you'll probably recognize that there are some areas that you can improve there. So again, we're not looking at skin color, but the person, the background of the person. And then more recently, it has only been in, I think, the last 5 or 10 years that the manufacturers have actually created headgear for those who wear a hijab to go to the OR. How many years and generations of, you know, people wearing the hijabs and burqas and stuff we've had in this country all around the world, including the UK. And it's just recently we were able to help support this culture in going into the OR as a surgeon, as a tech. And then as you mentioned earlier too, I have had experiences with some staff being very, very critical of my Muslim colleagues who needed to go pray 5 times, especially in the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is coming, I think, on Thursday, Friday. So, and that is a huge festival for them. And they get jealous. Well, why does he need to go and step away 5 times for 15 minutes for the day? Well, I can't get a smoke break 5 times a day, or I can just step away because of my religion. And these are conversations that our own colleagues are having. That ignorance, or is that purposeful? Where is the sense of understanding or accommodation? And again, these are the things that are happening right now in our industry. So how do we prevent issues like this within our own community? When I have a patient coming into MR, and I know that their clothing or their family member, that is like their security for them. This is important. And we're asking them to put on a gown with everything bearing, or to open up their hair for us to see, right? Or for us to become critical of their spouse or the male figure just because we don't understand it. You know, that's not liberal, or how can you treat a woman like that? Who am I to criticize them, right? And we get into this very critical mode without that sense of understanding. And here we are, a key aspect of leadership is what? To understand our stakeholders. Who are our stakeholders? Our staff and our patients, the people around us. But again, we're supposed to be understanding them, but we're leading them through our lens only, as opposed to a full 360, which includes your emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, a whole bunch of things. But we leave this key aspect out. Do I really know you as an employee? Do I know you as a patient? Because what you want and what you want as a patient could be quite different, right? And yes, there's something to be said about best practices, but we have to use best practices in the cultural context. And then the key thing here, this part here, is that all aspects of people's lives are influenced by their background. How people show up to work, their work ethic, you know, whether or not they want to contribute, you know, how they respond to change, ambiguity, information, all that has a foundation, the roots in culture. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So, you know, every presentation I create, there's some significance behind it. So I'll share quite a bit of stories as I've gone along my career and the cultural shocks that I've experienced so that you can get a better picture of it. So the key aspect of leadership here is releasing assumptions. So I attended a women's conference, sustainability conference in Malaysia several years ago. And I had on just a simple black dress. I'm short, so I like to wear my heels. So I had some high heels then. And the majority of the attendees there were from somewhere Asia. And I can see a sense of horror on their face when I am so excited to come and present. And here I am looking just like them, but I'm completely westernized. So that experience helped me to really, like, especially if I feel like, you know, depending on the audience, I give that backstory about myself so that they can understand and accept me. And when you're in these different cultures, and especially similarly going back home, and people feel like you're a disgrace to the culture, or you have, you know, grown out of us and become, you know, like they call us a wet Yankee at home. But so these are it really, because here I am so excited to share my information. And when I walked in, I was like, wow, these are people that I thought I can connect with. Here I am thinking, I once used to be very shy and reserved. You'll find me in the back corner. I will not network, not meet eye contact. And then I grew out of that. And here I am, showing that here's my knowledge, for them to come up and not so much follow my footsteps, but I'm a mentor for them. But they saw me completely different. So, and again, that was my own assumptions that just because I look like you, I can relate to you. And similarly, I visited Italy many years ago, and because I felt I was so good in Spanish, to get around, I'm like talking Spanish. You never talk Spanish to an Italian, right? Again, the assumptions. So here I am thinking it's okay, but offending somebody. And similarly here, maybe what I would have done differently is probably be a little bit more conservative with my dress, even though that I thought I was relatively conservative there. So, it's having that sense of understanding with the people around you, because that can help develop your communication and your behavior with them. And again, it's like, being able to share the background. People have more context when I understand fully, your life story a bit. I can better relate to maybe why you behave in certain ways, how you communicate, the things that are important to you, your values. So culture only comes into focus, and really when we look at the reasons why over the last few years, is because there has been an HR complaint. Somebody came and said, they're discriminated against me because of my skin color, or they use these words that are offensive. So we find ourselves in within HR, which I kind of found myself because I was joking with an employee in the break room. And I said, gosh, if I had done this as a little girl, my father would crucify me. And crucify was not a very good word, because I heavily offended somebody. And the thing about it is that I was not even able to, the employee did not come to me, and I was a director then. The employee did not come to me and say, hey, Nicole, that word was a little bit sensitive to me. It went straight to HR and it blew up like wildfire, just for a simple comment. And I am thinking, I am all excited, remembering in my days where my father is, my mother would say, don't do that. You don't get in trouble. Your father's going to crucify you. Thinking that it just means the extent of trouble that I would be in, not really being sensitive to the words that I was using. And it also goes to show that sometimes things can be so sensitive to people, and it would be very difficult for them to come and have a conversation with me and say, hey, Nicole, do you know what this means for me and my religion? Do you know the significance? And give me education rather than go and complain about it. So certainly a learning experience then. Patients complain about their interactions, okay? They disrespected my culture, or they disrespected me, or I felt treated differently. So I've been seeing more and more of these patient complaints specific to respecting differences. And then oddly, I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but every day I'm outing a fire at work. Constant firefighting, right? There's always something burning at work. And, to be able to spend time on these initiatives to train staff, we sometimes don't have that time. But showing that in today's world, we need to make the time to consider culture. And only when our organization is focusing on diversity initiatives, then when it comes into focus. So if your organizations are celebrating Hispanic month, Italian month, whatever it is, you have the dining hall that they dress up a bit, then that's when these things come into focus. Otherwise, we're kind of just living our daily lives. And then when we see it too is when there's a racial crisis in the community. Especially with recent events, for some people, it was hard coming back into the organization and saying, how are you affected by this? How can I better support you? How do you feel in our environment? And those conversations could be quite difficult, especially if there was no context to it before. And then again, a personal situation faced. If we have now new people coming in, I recently had a traveler come in, and one of the comments was, I hope people are nice to him. Yeah, exactly. And another comment was, specific to an ethnic patient, this blank patient is drunk. And I wondered, if it was a different skin color, ethnicity, would you just call that patient a drunk patient? Or would you have emphasized the ethnicity behind it? So those are the types of things that get my wheels turning, thinking, gosh, we need some training around this. Because again, what's the difference if it is a yellow drunk patient versus a purple drunk patient, right? It should just be a drunk patient. But clearly to them, it was not the case. Oh, that's a bad color there. So the benefits to you as a leader for attending this session is that we want to see improved relationships. How can I better my communication with you? How can I understand your behaviors? You were talking about one of your staff members and the troubles that you were having. And sometimes digging into their background give you better understanding. Oh, this is why he behaves like this. These are the values that are very important and critical to them. And also, when you understand people's culture, you help reach their full potential. So the person that's sitting in the back of their room, or it's very reserved, how do you get them to come up, right? How do you, somebody from a collectivistic society, how do you get them to come up and be a leader? Or how do you get them to come up and be that team player or that individual who wants to excel? In some cases, it's hard because that is not culturally appropriate for them. So what are the components of diversity? When you think of diversity, throw out some words for me. What are you thinking of? Tell me. When you hear the word diverse group, if you're looking around here and you're saying we're a diverse group, what are some of the things that you're thinking? Yes, sir? Okay, yeah. Male, female. What are you thinking? Okay, yes, race, religion, socioeconomic background. What are you thinking back there? When somebody tells you we're a diverse group. And what specifically about the background? Yes, and your experiences. A big one too is really the environment you grew up. How your parents or those who raised you, the values that they emphasize. That truly, all of those components help us to make a diverse group. So we can go around here and we have so many different stories. We can say, wow, we're so different to each other. So diversity is exactly that. And it's not limited to race and skin color, but it goes beneath the surface. Ethnicity, gender, who do we identify as, right? Gender identity, sexual orientation, age, social class, physical abilities, religious, ethnic value system, and more. And when we talk about, especially when you look at turnover within your organization, one of the things to come back to, if you had to have exit interviews, you will see that a lot of times what I believed in, the organization wasn't doing. Our values clash. And that is a source of a lot of conflict between staff and the organization, or between staff themselves. I don't see the same thing as you do. I don't experience. You will stay and work 18 hours a day. I will leave at 8 because maybe I value money differently. I value time, all of these things come in. And what happens? Oh, he never wants to stay. I always have to pick up the slack without truly understanding the why. Some people really don't want to stay, but what really are the reasons behind that? So we've done quite a bit of a build-up. Let's talk really about culture now. How do you eat a watermelon? How do you eat a watermelon?
First with salt on it.
Some salt on it. How do you eat a watermelon? Do you put salt and Tabasco on it? Does that gross you out thinking about putting Tabasco on it? How do you eat your watermelon? Curiosity, I like it. How does...
Usually some sort
Now, take a poll here. How do you eat a watermelon? Straight at it. Crunch the seeds. But here we are. You're a little bit more knowledgeable, and you would say, "Gosh, makes me curious. I'd like to try that." But sometimes the first reaction is, "Ew, who does that? Are you crazy? How would you ruin a perfectly sweet watermelon with putting Tabasco sauce in it?" You see? And then depending on the group that you have, this can be a source of conflict. What do you mean cayenne pepper limes? Are you crazy? See? And then, so depending on how much they're willing to meet, how much they're willing to be curious and try it, but it's the simple things like this. And now when we put it into the value system and cultural context, we can see how these conversations can escalate. And now immediately, I don't like you anymore, right? Seriously, this is what happens.
I'll get the fruit and start eating. It'll take her like 10 minutes to prep the same kind of fruit. So like, she has like a whole, some kind of sauce that they do like by the fruit out in LA on the street. They put like some kind of sauce on it, other stuff. And I'm looking like, what you making?
Like, what? Right. So now take that into the environment. I cannot do it like this. You're asking us to work more with less resources, or you're asking us to bring our patients in and treat them this way. I cannot do this. So this is exactly what happens in the workplace, because I cannot understand how on earth you can eat a watermelon with limes and Tabasco. That just becomes a true source of conflict for us. How about this one? Who eats pizza with ketchup and mustard? She was like, "No way, Jose." Pizza with ketchup and mustard. Do you? Oh, you see? He's like, "I'm telling you right now." See, exactly. This is what I'm saying. We have judgment right now based on just food, right?
It's going the wrong direction. Really, stay away from us.
Right. Exactly. So this is what I'm saying. This simple things like this can cause us discomfort. What do you mean you don't eat your eggs with ketchup? This is amazing. But they will not share what you see. And instead of saying, "Wow, well, maybe that suits you, but I think I'll prefer it without ketchup," you're just disgusting. And these are the comments that come out, right? From Trinidad. I lived in Guam for a bit, yeah.
We had a gentleman from the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
He likes those eggs.
Balut, the duck. Okay, let's talk about that for a quick second here. Do you guys know what balut is? It is an egg with a duck embryo. Okay, and you steam it, and you crack it, and you eat it. All bones, feathers, everything. And you chew it, yum, yum, yum. And it's supposed to be really good. But those are one of the things for me, even with my cultural awareness and intelligence, when you tell me about it, I'm like, ew, no. And unfortunately, it's not a good reaction, but seriously, it is a delicacy. And I've tried to eat it a couple of times to assimilate, and I just couldn't do it. The other one is that they also have baby chicks selling chicks on a stick. So it's 1-day-old chick that they deep fry, and you chomp, chomp, chomp. Yes. Yes. So yes, we have all of these variances. And again, because I am not familiar, you can see the reaction right now, even though. So again, you know, if you were to think that We have Filipino colleagues amongst us. These are some of the things like, oh, you're judging me for what I eat, right? Whereas this is a delicacy for us. Same thing when I was in the military and I told people about curry. Have you ever had curry goat? And they're like, you eat a goat? Yeah, yeah, I eat it. I curry it and I eat it, right? And it was just like, you're barbaric. See all these iguanas out here? Don't let a Trinidadian see that. We get it, we chop it up, we eat it with curry. I don't, my husband does. But it's the same thing. How barbaric are you? Where do you come from? You know, you're eating a lizard, right? So again, instead of looking at it with curiosity, our face, we grimace and we're already judging, right? So yes, indeed. What about this one? Where do you store your ketchup? In the fridge or on the counter? On the counter, in the fridge. Okay, you see, he's now becoming fiery now. I'm gonna put my foot down. Exactly.
That's when you start living together and you find things out. So I put my hot sauce the same way. I put my hot sauce in the refrigerator. Yeah, she does not. So she won on that one because hot sauce.
Oh, she won on it.
And I'm okay with it.
Oh goodness.
I didn't think about it too. In LA, like it's different too.
Yeah.
You know, in Georgia, you know, we get really hot and really cold, and Georgia does what it does.
We cook a hot sauce, leaving the sauce on the stove overnight without it.
Mhm.
And then we just turn it on the next day in the evening.
We can do this. Yeah.
Everything will spoil, right? You were gonna add something, Ed?
No, I was just gonna say, but the ketchup is, there was a thing that she thought the other day, and about ketchup not being put in the refrigerator, that we were storing our ketchup wrong. And I can't remember where I seen it. I'm from Pittsburgh, so Heinz ketchup is great. That's the main, used to be the main staple for that area.
Right.
My wife, it's in the refrigerator. It can't get it cool out. There's no way. It's in the refrigerator. I'm like, it can sit on it. You can hurt it, but
more importantly, you left it upside down.
Ah, yes, right. That's important to you, but it may not be important to him. Oh, so verbiage. What is an icebox? What do you call an icebox? A fridge, right? But it's different. It's unfamiliar. I walked into Walmart several years ago and I was getting ready to go to Trinidad and I was like, do you have any mosquito repellent? Aha, exactly. Yep. That is exactly what you know where I'm going with it. So yes, so I stood there and again, I was not as an educator then. So she looked at me and she's like, what do you want? I said, I'm looking for mosquito repellent. So we had a little face standoff there, just standing, because I'm expecting her to understand me because none of us wants to compromise. So because I was trying to be facetious and an idiot back then, I was like, okay. And I slapped it. So then she looked at me and said, oh, mosquito. I said, mosquito, whatever it is. Yes, I'd like some mosquito repellent. But, you know, so what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we get into these little tiffs just because of words, and that interrupts the relationship. He's talking about compromise. No, I'll never do that. Oh, hold on here. No, this is how it's going to be. And somebody has to give in. And that is exactly what happens with culture. This is what ethnocentrism and following the dominant culture. Because you want it a certain way, you know, what is the compromise? Why can't we have it both ways, right? So you're exactly what you're saying. We're taking it into the workplace and expanding on that. All right, so and these are some of the things that you can ask people. What are your thoughts and feelings towards a small or large family? Independence versus expanded family, collectivism, autonomy on a group. I want to work alone versus I prefer to work in a group. We don't look at merit independently. We gain recognition as a group. It's not because of Nicole, it's because of us. So that could be cultural as well. Look at how people speak. The emphasis on titles. So in a hierarchical society, a society that likes power distance, doctor, Mr., those words are emphasized. Versus more in our Western culture, you go to the surgeon, you call him by first name. In some cultures, that is very difficult to do. And then uncertainty. We live in ambiguous times within our organizations. Some of your staff want clear information, right? They want to know why and how and everything associated with it, but others are okay. Yeah, I don't know what tomorrow brings. When I'm in Guam, I am trying to prepare for a typhoon. I'm talking with my CEO. Oh, why are you thinking so far out? Completely different with strategic planning. Well, I'm planning far out because last time this happened, water was pouring through my elevators and I had to have a plan. But this is island life. Hang loose. It'll take care of itself. So even just that dynamic was quite, I couldn't get used to it. Walking through the supermarkets there, I'm like zipping like a mad lady and everybody's like, oh, because time never stops. Time is available. So we talk about we need initiatives. This is how it needs to get done. That is not the mindset with that culture. And similarly to people like myself from the islands. And then look at it. How punctual are you versus your staff member strolling in 15 minutes late or a patient strolling in 15 minutes late and still expecting to be seen? It is because of the emphasis on time. So for those who, they're always punctual, you're going to have that conflict. Or look at how your staff, other than, your schedule getting messed up, if you were to uncover the roots of why your staff is feeling this anger towards your patient for coming 10 minutes late and still expecting to be seen, it's probably because of the value they place on time. Are you the 5 minutes early? Are you okay if I made it 10 minutes late? I'm still on time. And I can tell you some colleagues that I worked with in the UK, they were talking about several of the staff members getting written up for punctuality, even though they were really good staff members. And coming to find out about it, yeah, being late is no big deal. What is 15 minutes, right? In Guam, none of the clocks in the organization worked. None of them. So there was no emphasis on time. And likewise, you're on island time, right? Where I'm coming from, we're always late. If you show up 2 hours late, you're still there. So, and then how much do you display assertiveness? You have some cultures that are very meek and mild. And as a result, they feel like, you're a pushover or you're not engaged. But it doesn't mean that I'm not engaged. It's just culturally, maybe I'm a little bit on the quiet side. Or in some cases, it's patriarchal. So it really depends on the background of that person that would help you understand their assertiveness. So, sometimes we want strong leaders in front of us, but because maybe of their cultural background, your perception of a strong leader, they may not fit that. And unfortunately, they get passed up for an opportunity. And then those who you say are just coming to work and doing what they're supposed to do, that may not necessarily be because they're lazy or something. It's just because they were never pushed. Again, if you look at the CNMI Islands, my observation going into Palau was that they, again, are just being. They're there living the island life. It's the Japanese and the Chinese that come in and they promote the island, they build up. So those are the doers, whereas the Palauans are just being, and they're doing their part, as far as uplifting the island. But if you were to say, if you look at the doers and the beers in your staff, you can kind of get an understanding of Well, is it because of laziness and work ethic, or is it really because of how they were brought up? Just kind of stay in the background, do your thing, speak when you're spoken to. Don't come out there and ruffle any feathers. Yeah.
Now, let's say you have somebody who has cultural, isn't time sensitive,
Mhm.
because of the way they were raised, like you said, certain islands, etc. How do you go about changing that if it's highly important to your environment that people do arrive?
Yeah, so that, let me tell you, I struggled quite a bit with that, more so because their value, what is their value to them? So maybe what I had to do was change that. It wasn't so much about time, but now the impact to your team. So it took time completely away from it. You're not late per se, we're not using those words. When you arrive to work, what is happening is that I can't have proper handoff between the OR or the staff. And it's really bringing down your team. They cannot get home to their children. So appealing to the different value. And in that case, it was family and teamwork, because that person knew that their team would stand behind them all the time. He didn't care less what time he came to work, but he really valued the team. Uh-huh.
Question. So much time when you have individuals that have priority issues, and what happens is you laid it out the team, meaning these objectives done. But you have an individual that is, the excuse I heard kept hearing, well, people are asking to do something. Okay. But if I lay out the objective, how do you override? How do you explain to them we need to get the primary objective done before the other stuff done?
Yeah, and we can have an 8-hour conversation on that. So it comes back to, again, objectives may not be important to me. I'm here just because of a job. I get the paycheck, and that's it that I'm caring about. So, and we kind of talked about this with her situation yesterday. When you peel back that onion and you try to understand, well, what is it you want out of this, right? For you to have a job here. So if you understand that money or having the job is the motivator, well, what happens if we don't meet these objectives? Do you think that you'll still have a place here with us?
But in this scenario, the problem is my team and leadership, it's not that individual's fault. It's because everybody's asking them to do something. And I said, well, but if we lay out the objectives, then when we've had the discussion, it's not just gonna say no. I can get to that after I meet the primary objective. And that's, the problem is when you have a mass group of people, if they see that, the rest of the group, then it's a critical effect. You have like staff 60, and it affects the other 50 guys.
Yeah, because it's either now you're favoriting, or how come you let this person get away with this and you leave them alone? Yeah, and then that is exactly what happened. We leave people alone because we don't know how to deal with them. And then one thing snowballs, and now the whole rest of the staff is against you because, yeah, I totally feel you. But, so for that, I have several ideas on it. But essentially, you come back to, again, what is important to you? Maybe it is, if you appeal to the sense of the team, or pride, or give them something that they can get that acknowledgement, power. People sometimes, depending on the culture, I want to be seen as the one who, was the martyr for this environment. I was the one who saved the radiology department. So just being able to truly uncover what is valuable to them. And it may come back to, if you're into psychology, you hear about theory X and theory Y people. Those type of theory X people just need a lot of micromanaging and telling them, do as I say, or else these are the consequences. So again, some cultures are like that as well. They will only do something when there is a significant consequence coming. And I put that in the cultural aspect. I mean, people generally as a whole are like that, but it comes back to motivation, reinforcement, a whole bunch of things but obviously, sometimes you can try all of that, and it would be, this is your performance improvement plan. We give you 2 weeks. If I don't see improvement, this is what can happen. And then depending on your organization, by the 3rd time you're out, or, in some cases, I have had to have people on performance improvement plan for a year, just trying to work with them in a unionized environment. So all of those things come into play. This is why I like outpatient practice. Sometimes you can just get rid of the bad ones. All right, let's see. Somebody give me a time check, about 20 minutes. Okay, so what is culture? Culture really comes down to your assumptions, your behaviors, how you think, act, and feel. And that is what really pushes us to, do you eat the watermelon with the Tabasco? Do you eat the corn with the mayo? What is familiar? What is not familiar? Because this is the stuff I did not grow up with, or this is what I was familiar with growing up. And how strongly you feel, no, 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 Mrs., we're going to compromise, or nope, this is not going to go into the fridge, it's going to go into the counter. So really, how strongly you feel about something will dictate the behaviors in that relationship. And as you can see, we've talked about this. This is important because we need to integrate culture into your practice due to more immigrants coming in, people moving with a remote, diverse workforce. Recently, I saw a CT job advertised for $7,000 for the week. People are, agency now, people are moving, so they're going to go into different environments that either you're not familiar with, leading them, or they're not familiar with your team. So overall, the significance is, I want to point out that sometimes our patient-centric initiatives aren't truly patient-centric. So something for you to think about. Do we allow family members to come back and support those decisions? Some decisions are made as a group versus just me or my spouse. My children's got to be there. The extended family's got to be there to make a medical decision. And a lot of times we push them out of the room. No, it's only +1 can be here. Allowing family rituals. This was, again, something new to me in Guam. When somebody died, we would have the whole family and they'll be around the morgue and they will be sitting there singing and engaging in their ritual practices, or they'll be out on the lawn in front. A lot of times security trying to kick them out, but then we say we're patient-centric, right? So how do we allow these, how do we allow patients to truly be themselves without, putting our dominant culture on them? And just overall understanding of practices. Perhaps your staff has encountered a patient like this, with these marks on their back and like, oh my God, how can you do that? Again, it's the language that's coming out, where cupping is a traditional technique. And I know there are so many, even within my own culture, we use cupping, especially for girls on their tummies. So if you were to lift something very heavy, you would go to the old lady or your grandmother, they'll rub oil, they'll put a candle right at your navel and put a glass over it. And what that does, it sucks the oxygen, your belly goes whoop into the glass, and whatever you had that was dispersed because of picking up, now that's gone. We don't necessarily, we haven't had it such that we have these severe marks, but what can happen, sometimes they use alcohol, and if that candle falls, there burns. And exactly, you go to the hospital, oh yeah, because of your practices, this is what happened. So, but, and then here, we hear comments from support staff. They're rather unusual people, aren't they? Or do you see all their tattoos and piercings? Or do you see the relationship between each other? And these are the words that are being used, or the conversations that we're having within earshot of our patients. So the benefits, so we've talked about all the challenges that we face, but the benefits of a diverse workforce is that, we're able to harness various perspectives. You're able to come up with ideas you wouldn't have already thought about, but then there are significant challenges associated. So we talked about all of these: time, ambiguity, power, distance. Somebody wants to be called by doctor or Mr. versus, having other people call them by their first name. Ambiguity of information. How many of you are very detail oriented? You want all the details in there versus some of us will give ambiguous information. For example, so culturally, say, okay, you're trying to get, I heard somebody talk about coconuts, right? The coconut restaurant, maybe. So you're trying to get to coconuts. We'll go down the street. When you come to the second light, you'll see that big, beautiful mango tree bearing mangoes. Take a right there. And when you go down there, you'll see a bus stop. Not that bus stop, but the next bus stop. And sometimes this is how our staff members talk to each other. very vague, very ambiguous information, and some of us just cannot tolerate that. I need details. If I don't give you details, what's going to happen? You're going to go crazy with me, right? Exactly. Or you will just now become so frustrated with me as your admin assistant, as your film library person, you know, and these things are the source of frustration because I was never, you know, I was never into details. So these are what we call Hofstede's cultural dimension. If you ever have time for light reading, something to look into. Language, I talked to you about my crucify terminology. Perspective unconscious bias. I would bet that the majority of us will not discuss with everybody here your unconscious bias. And all of us have it. We do have our sources of stereotypes and prejudice. And usually, as leaders, we just kind of resolve that within ourselves. We learn more about other cultures, we become more accepting. But if we were to have a discussion right now, tell me what your unconscious bias is or what your stereotypes are, it would be a very uncomfortable situation because there could be somebody in this room that you have stereotypes and prejudices against. So how do we overcome that if we're not willing to talk about it is usually, you know, how we end up stuck in this area not knowing. And then various interpretations of professional conduct. What does work ethic look like to you, right? Work ethic for some people is coming in and doing bare minimum versus work ethic is coming in and doing 10 or 16 hours of work. So your value and work ethic is relatable to culture. Open door policy. So in some cultures, I will not come to you as my senior, my leader, and tell you that something's wrong in the department. You are respected as a leader by title or by age. So open door policy for some staff members may not be truly open door. They will never come to you and tell you what's going on. And that's kind of how I felt in Guam. My staff, majority were Filipino, a mix of Chamorro, highly matriarchal society. So even though I was probably younger than most of them, they respected my authority and my decision. So they will not really set me straight if I was veering off. So when I recognize, well, gosh, open door is really not an open door policy. How do I get them to tell me as it is? Tell me when I'm going off course or to make recommendations. And that was a hurdle to get over. Language barrier. Sometimes with your patients or your staff, you know, if you have somebody with a heavy accent and they're your scheduler or your customer service rep, and you know people are having a hard time understanding them, and you're having patient complaints, how do you manage that? I'm telling you about your accent, but this is an integral part of you. You're not suited for the job. That's a very awkward conversation to have. And, you know, and then how do you get your patients to understand that? So I've been rounding quite a bit and trying to, you know, collect some information. But if, you know, if you have somebody with a heavy accent that answers the phone, hello, this is Northern Arizona Healthcare, versus a sing-song voice, you know, especially as Caribbean people, is like, up and down, you know, it's a sing-song type of voice. So that may be sounding more cherry than somebody who has that kind of stoic, straight, hardcore sounding voice. Imagine somebody with a heavy Russian accent saying, I love you, versus somebody with an Italian or Hispanic accent or a French, you know, it would be usually beautiful to hear. So that's exactly sometimes the complaints that I see. I cannot understand them, or they were not nice to me. But was it because of how they presented themselves? What is your expectation of me for customer service? So all that can be impacted with how people speak. So blatant ignorance. Let's go into story time here. So in the military, you know, this was many moons ago. I left to get married. You know, I got married in Hinduism, and we got to do how the stars and the moon align and the specific dates. So I left during training to go get married, and I came back. And this here, that's some red dye. It's a powder. We call that sindoor. Okay, it's worn in the middle of the hair, just like that. Okay, so just as a you know, a little red, or sometimes you'll see the Indian woman with a dot, okay? But this one is the die that you take and you put it there, and it's very sacred. It's, you know, showing significance that you're married. So you remember I told you I was naive, shy, you know, I didn't even know how I got into the military, but apparently I signed the dotted line and I was there. So true story, true story. So seriously came back and I was wearing this because I was proud of my culture. I grew up Catholic and Hindu and I really enjoyed the Hinduism side of it. And so my drill sergeant came up and he was like, "Soldier, what is that in your head?" And I would explain, you know, I just got married, so I'm wearing this. But it would happen more and more. Then one time it's like, "Soldier, you know you're bleeding? Oh my gosh, you're bleeding, soldier." And these are the types of conversations that people would have with me. So I was like, these people are so ignorant. And again, I was not the educator back then. And I was really upset at how they would approach me. These are supposed to be leaders. Most of these people were my drill sergeants coming to me. So one day, not my drill sergeant, somebody else came and was like, "Soldier, you know you got something in your hair. What happened?" So I was like, you know, I recently got married. And in our culture, the old women, they sat us down and they plucked my hair one by one until it left that mark there. And they were like, "Wow, really? This is what happens in your culture?" And I was like, "No, that is not what happened in the culture." But it's because I felt like people were asking me stupid questions. I'm going to give a stupid answer, as opposed to, you know, now I would educate people. But they believed me. So I used that story a few more times, but essentially it went from, "Oh, that's what you do," to like, "Wow," you know. So the fancy story or the more torturous study created a different reaction. Yeah, so it wasn't like, "Oh, you guys do that," versus, "Oh, wow." So yeah, so this is what it looks like, right? And essentially it was not a source of curiosity, but, "Oh my God, soldier, you're bleeding," right? As opposed to, "So, hey, Nicole, I see something in your hair. Does that have significance?" That is probably a better way to approach it. Exactly, right? Tell me more. So all of these things, you know, from the way we make decisions to how you conduct yourself, all of these things are changes in our values that impact. A big one, I don't know if you've heard of the term cockpit culture. And that's what I was alluding to with Guam. The co-pilot knew that this Asiana flight was going down and did not say anything. He said it in a roundabout way, but no way that I will come out and tell my authority that he is doing something wrong. So much so that it led to the crash of the flight. This is a South Korean flight. So they do not, absolutely will not disrespect your elders, to include telling them, "Hey, the plane is going down. You might want to do something about it." And this is how I felt sometimes with my staff, that perhaps a patient can die for me to find out what was happening. See? Yes, and even to today, even though I'm back on US soil, sometimes I feel like that. You know, how did you grow up? Is that ratting on somebody? Are you calling out somebody in authority? Who can get into trouble? Would it be the group or an individual? So all of those things go through my mind because I know about this and I've experienced it. So regardless, something bad can be happening and it will end up happening because of cultural values. And here's another one, relationship versus caste. So this is me. I was on a rad aid trip to Cabo Verde, you know, installing a PAC system, beautiful island off the coast of Africa. We went there for 2 weeks. This is a funded trip. But all we did was drink wine and have conversations. But for me, it wasn't great. Why? Because this is a funded trip. We were sent there to do stuff. And by week 1, we weren't really doing a whole lot. We went to work, you know, we tried to have some conversations, training, but they were all about relationship building. How can I come into your environment and start telling you what to do and how to do, and you don't know me from Adam? So in some cultures, we need to build that relationship. Same thing with my Guam peers. I couldn't come and start saying, hey, Josh, do you have that report ready? I had to go through the whole thing, half a day. How are you? How was your weekend? How was the family? Get through probably about 5 minutes of conversation before you can actually get the task done, as opposed to going straight to it. And this was more meaningful. And up to today, this was several years ago, we still maintain contacts and we share. And they're always ready. Okay, when you come back, then we will do this stuff. We still ended up, getting some work done, but not to the extent that we were thinking. What was super valuable was building the relationship, not the task.
Not just culture.
Yes, definitely. Because I am very cognizant too. These are the emails. This is actually some emails that went out to my staff from my manager yesterday. No, hi, how are you? Good morning. Please do this. And yes, depending on who you're dealing with, location in the US. Hi, Nathan, how are you? Hope you're having a good day. Can you look into this for me, please? Okay, but who says your way is right versus my way? Oh, exactly. And this is what I told you. This is what I told you, how you were brought up. Now they're trying to instill their values on me. What about the parent who says, just get it done? Why are you still talking? Is there an end to the story? Let's get it done, right? So exactly what I'm saying. Look how your upbringing can be revealed in a single email. We're not relationship here, we're very task oriented, and that's how we are in the Western society. What about the emotional display, right? That can also be a source of how you were brought up. If every time you pouted and screamed and had a tantrum, somebody gave in to you, that would be the same expectation. How many of you have staff members come into your office and you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be an emotional outburst? It's because they have been conditioned to think and act like that because of how they were groomed growing up. Yes, we need to be therapists now. And then the organizational culture affects your leadership. How are decisions made in the organization? What does authority look like? Can you go directly to the CEO? Is it a whole chain of command going up and down? Are decisions made very wide or are they narrow? Well, you're on your place, but can I make the decision, right? So it really depends on organizational culture. How is power divided? Is it highly political? Are you trying to save relationships or are you trying to get the right work done? Those things could be crucial to your own survival as a leader. How do you navigate the politics? All of these things become difficult and a source of not holding on to people. You get people coming in and out as a result of that. Also, how are relationships viewed? How is gender viewed? Once upon a time, somebody says, Nicole, if you want to make it in the C-suite, make sure you get some gray hair, cut your hair, and put on glasses. Because as an Asian female, you will never make it into the C-suite, especially with a radiology background. Directly to my face. Another leader says, hey, Nicole, what about when I came and I said I want to grow within my organization, have you ever thought about IT, Amazon, Microsoft? A lot of people like you are there. People that I looked up to. So these are the things that our people are going through, right? Oh yeah, you're kind of meek and mild. You'll never be a leader in this world. Or you sit and you have conversations with vendors, and if there's maybe two of us, they'll look at you more than me. Yes, either because of gender, because of age. I think you're more experienced than me. So that's why it was recommended. I cut my hair and I put on glasses so that I can look older and more mature. Worse yet, you're Asian too. So you know what? And sometimes these guys, they want to see somebody who's strong and confident. And they didn't say it, but I knew it was they're looking for also a different skin color. So some of these things could be very difficult to navigate. So now, you now know that cultural sensitivity is about cultural knowledge. You know, you've learned quite a bit about Guam, Trinidad. Understanding and accepting with curiosity, that is a key thing there. We're not going to do it like this, ketchup stays in the pantry. No, that compromise, okay? And knowing the differences exist and just being able to coexist for operational effectiveness. So what do we do first? We take an inventory of our stereotypes. I told you we probably can't do that out loud. Most of us would probably be embarrassed. But if you were to just answer these questions in your head, if I were to ask you, what do you think about any of these cultures? What would be some of the things come to mind? Food, yeah. Wine, oui, monsieur. All the food. So also, it could be like people hear me and they say, oh, you sound a little British. And I said, yes, I grew up in Trinidad. It's a Queen's colony. Oh, so that means you must be brilliant, huh? Because of my accent, but I'll take it, okay. Similarly, my kids get this a lot. Oh, because you're Indian, you got that scholarship, huh? Yeah. Yeah, you're brilliant. That's why, because you're Indian. And especially when living in Washington, oh, your family must live in Redmond, huh? Because that's where all the Indians live. Again, those assumptions. Some of them I'll take, right? But then Africans, oh, what tribe are you from? Sometimes they get that. But, you know, once we start going through this, we would recognize it's more than the buildings, the culture, the accent. There's a whole lot more. How do you view people and their body language? Maybe just even think about it. When you first saw me or everybody in this room, what were you automatically thinking? You size them up in some way, right? Yes. No, but seriously, that same Malaysia conference, we had some colleagues, and this is where I decided to up my game and how I dress for my conferences. She was just beautifully decked out. I thought so, but I was the only Westerner there. Everybody else thought that she was too revealing, the high heels was too much, and it was distracting. I couldn't learn from that person because she is superficial, high maintenance, those type of people. Yeah.
What was the typical dress there then?
Cultural.
Okay.
Very cultural and conservative. Yeah. So, and yes, these are the things. We size up people based on how they are. Yes? Yes. So for me, that was the decision. Whenever I visited, I would make sure that I have sleeves, and instead of wearing my 6-inch, I'll probably wear a wedge and maybe not as a fitted dress. But yeah, so these are the things that I would be cognizant of. Not because I feel like I want to fit in, but it's almost a source of respect. And now similarly, growing up, even wearing short pants in front of my grandparents or my uncle, and we're a pretty liberal culture. But it's one of those things, sometimes I cringe looking at my teenagers, because if my family, as they look at pictures, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, but this is just the culture. And all of those are based on our upbringing. So when you're leading now with cultural sensitivity, when you dig into the family history, you know, the events that impacted their lives, the people that they came into contact with, or if there's an immigration story, how did the people treat them? All of those things now could affect our relationship. So, so a good one is when I came to the US, my parents says, okay, Nicole, go out, we'll see you, bye. I had some Puerto Ricans that took me under their wings. So for me now, I have a high value for that culture. They were very caring and nurturing. So if I had a negative experience with that, you know, if I am now dealing with you and I had a difficult experience with people like yourself, that may be just a source of untapped conflict, right? I have a grudge, or I was hurt by you, and now I'm working in the workplace with people like yourself. It does become uncomfortable. Then your exposure to bias. Sometimes I cringe at telling this story because of the judgment associated with it. But my family, my father, revered these two people, Hitler fans, Stalin fans. So much so that my father's nephews are called Adolf, Hitler, and Stalin. 3 boys. Exactly. So how do people view me after I tell that story? Even though I was exposed to bias, doesn't mean that I follow it. But sometimes, again, you remember I was talking about authenticity? Once we start digging into your background, how much are you willing to tell me? Are you willing to tell me that you eat goat like myself, iguana, or you have family members that support this? Maybe not. That took a lot of courage over the years to tell that story, because if you had an impression of me, maybe I just shattered it until you learn more. And these are the types of things that, you know, people around you could be experiencing. The other exposure to bias was my father was very pro-UK. Only the British are the best, right? He was in love with the British community. My father hated Indians, but he married an Indian. Father was 2nd generation Syrian. So when people look at me, I'm like, oh, you don't look Syrian. Well, yeah, I don't think or act like my dad, but this is the environment that I grew up. That, you know, these were the key people who were the people to look up to. Hitler, he did this because, or Britain is the greatest country on earth, and a lot more, to include my own self-image, because I was an Indian and he absolutely always had something very bad to talk about Indians. So understanding as I grew older, oh, he is very ignorant, you know, he is very ethnocentric, and being able to explain his behavior a little bit more versus when I was a little girl. So all of that now in today's world, we need to decondition ourselves to what is familiar, acceptable. So some quick, ooh, not that quick. Sorry. Somebody give me a quick time check here. I'm having too much fun. All right, let's wrap this up. So just some quick things here of, you know, when I talk about deconditioning yourself, so as you take your cultural inventory, you start understanding where these stereotypes are. And your stereotypes would mean you need to decondition your framework. What looks acceptable? Is this acceptable or this? Are these people uncouth? Are they rude? But who's to say that? If that is their culture, why am I critical of it? Yeah? I'm only critical of it because I don't know. The people that eat balut or these lovely fat delicious worms there or KFC for Christmas, who am I to say, ugh, you do that? So these are the things that are unfamiliar to us or accepting, and because only this is our frame of reference, this is not normal to me. So then instead of looking at it with curiosity, I'm going to be like, oh, you're just disgusting. What kind of people does that, right? So it really depends on your frame of reference. So when we first talked about all of these nationalities, there is so much more, your attitudes, perceptions, beliefs, everything now that is affected by your upbringing. And most times, especially us in the Western world, we like to say our culture is the best. Or we find ourselves, because I don't think that is appropriate, how you treat women or how you speak or how you think, then I feel that my culture is dominant. So we need to be very careful of that. And as a result of that, now there is a bias, affinity bias. Oh, because I sound like you or I think like you, I'm like you. Now, because you know that my parents like, or my father liked Hitler, you're like, oh, you go to the back of the room, right? So that's the bias there. We don't share commonality anymore. And as a result of that, it's the halo and horn effect. I am now bad employee, a bad patient. It's the yellow people that come in drunk are the drunk, nasty patients. It's the purple people that come in and they're so sweet. We form these biases explicitly or internally. So now as you leave here today, and we're departing with leading with cultural sensitivity, making sure that, I like that you recognize curiosity, recognize our differences, not just by skin color, but by our upbringing. That has a huge part to play in it. Adjust how you speak, not ew, you're crazy, who puts ketchup on their pizza, but oh, that is interesting. How does that taste? Oh, can you tell me what an icebox is? Oh, wow, you call a fridge an icebox? That is pretty cool, right? So just being able to facilitate those conversations. Increasing linguistic competency. How do you pronounce your staff's names, your patients' names? Keep learning. You came to this session that says a lot about, your commitment to learn more about this. Be mindful of your own language, your body language especially. Ew, your eyes go up. Okay, what does curry iguana taste like, right? And then as you lead with cultural sensitivity, have these team sessions with your staff and uncover their values. What is meaningful to them? What was meaningful to you growing up? What would you do for somebody new that you've met, or the first meal that you would serve them? What do you do on family traditions? And that way you can perform a cultural audit, and it helps you understand exactly why some people behave a certain way, and it actually opens up opportunities to build relationships. This is me in Guam trying to participate in the culture, and even doing something like this, which I thought was just simple dance. This was traditional dance. Sometimes there was a sense of awkwardness. Oh, you're an outsider coming to take over, put yourself in our culture. And it was not so much, saying, okay, gosh, I'm going to step out of this, but truly immersing myself so that I can understand and relate, and making sure that everything I did was respectful. So I asked for guidance. I also included my daughter in there, and it was a beautiful experience. But even something as just participating in somebody else's culture could be a source of conflict. You don't know anything about this. Or maybe you've seen people wear like bikinis with Hindu gods on them. That is a huge source of conflict for people that feel like, gosh, that shouldn't be on a body like that. This is something that's revered in their culture. And then how do you reduce all of this unintentional bias? Well, just as you were to look at this and spend a couple seconds, well, is that 3D or is it not? You need to pause and look below the layers so that we can see the differences. There is a little bee amongst the flowers there. So how are you pausing to truly understand what's behind the skin color, what's behind the accent, what's behind of your patients and your staff's eyes? Don't fall into the trap of simplistic assumptions, meaning that, just because you see the world one way means that everybody sees it that way. And I'll leave you with the final story here. So Nemo goes up to Dad and says, hey, Papa, what is this thing called water around us? Everybody's talking about this water. What is it? Why can't I see it? And Papa looks at Nemo and says, son, water is that of which is around you. When you're immersed in this, when you're seeing the world through your lens, you can't see anything. You cannot see that there is water around you because you're so immersed in your world. So I challenge all of you after today's session, as you interact more and more with people, try to uncover, try to lead with that sense of curiosity. And at the end of the day, I really believe it's all about educating your teams and bringing them together to uncover the differences. So those differences would be the source of cohesion versus conflict. Thank you for your attention and your participation. Now we will go with the people that wants to keep the ketchup outside. We'll stay to this side of the room, and then the rest you can leave. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your conference.